Hello, that's Magda, the Warsaw Guide, and today I'm going to take you somewhere else. I'm going to take you to the Kampinos National Park. The greatest thing about living in Warsaw is that it's very close to a national park. Basically, you can take a public transport from Warsaw and you get there. Kampinos is full of animals, pine trees, birch trees, also oaks. Wonderful place, beautiful place with a lot of wild nature. Elks have been recently introduced, or recently as in the second half of the 20th century, but also has a very different places. First, thoughts about protecting the nature of Kampinos forest appeared in 1920s and 1930s. First reserves were created at that time, and later, by the end of 1950s, the forest was proclaimed a national park. It's slightly smaller right now than it used to be, but it's still quite big. Kampinos Forest is located very near the biggest river junction in Poland, 5 big rivers, well, bigger and smaller rivers to be exact, including Bug River, Wisła River. Yeah, you remember that one. There are no lakes in Kampinos Forest. There is only let's say a small river that serves as a water canal, but there are a lot of marshes in the Kampinos forest. It's a wet area, basically marshes and sand dunes. I'll tell you about sand dunes a little more, but the marshes are also quite common. Kampinos Forest and its proximity to Warsaw is the reason why we have so many wild animals in the streets of Warsaw. Moose, to begin with. Moose is also the symbol of the Kampinos National Park. It was reintroduced to the park in the 1950s. Now the population is quite big, but sometimes the animals, wander a little bit too far to the south and they end in the streets of Warsaw. Another animal that was reintroduced to the park was beaver. Quite a lot of beavers actually, but as you remember from the little video, the longest of mine so far, so as you remember from the video about the Wisła River, the beavers are not uncommon right now in the valley of our biggest river, and there's also lynx in the forest. Plenty of birds. I dare say that the woodpecker is the most common bird of all places. No, I'm laughing actually, but since I started noticing the birds, that's the new thing. In my case, I can see woodpeckers everywhere. Well, they stand out. The ordinary woodpecker stands out because it has that red cap on the top of its head. You can see some of the birds on the screen right now. If I remember well, about 85 species of animals that live in the Kampinos forest are endangered species, so they have to be extra protected. Kampinos was also the place that I've seen a lot of the Polish history, especially in the 19th and 20th century. As you may know, a little bit at least, our history of the 19th and 20th century is quite complicated. So wars, uprisings, Kampinos as the huge forest near the borders of Warsaw was used many times as a hideout for the soldiers, for the partisans that were fighting, but it was also used in other way by the Germans. But I will tell you about it in the video next time, a little bit more about the historical place in Palmiry Forest. Alder cars are very common in the national park, in the Kampinos National Park. Very often they can be seen in the reserves. There are several reserve areas in the Kampinos forest, and then most of them you can see a very interesting landscape like the one you see on the screen right now. So a forest that grows on a little tuft of grasses. Well, alder cars are always growing on the wet areas with a lot of marshes, with the peat bogs in Kampinos National Park. This is the perfect the perfect conditions for this type of the forest to grow. When you are in the area full of marshes, you can also encounter those tufts with grass. That's like a first colonization for the plants. They start growing in those small tufts. Then the trees appear. If you look ahead of us, well, it's the dried out marsh. Usually you will see a tree growing out from those tufts. So it's the very important part of the ecosystem here in the park. And here you can see how it ends when the trees start growing on the tufts of grass, and then they become bigger and bigger. Those are actually quite young, relatively speaking, but that's the process. That's how plants are colonizing the marshes, the big ones. As I've already mentioned, in the Kampinos Park you will find many different plants and trees. All of us know the white birch, the common birch, but not all of us know the dark birch. I don't know if it's the right botanical expression for name for this birch, so I'll look it up and put it on the screen if it's the wrong one. But the dark birch, as you can see, is quite similar to the ordinary white birch, though it's dark. It has a similar kind of tree bark as the white one, though it lacks a certain type of, pigment, so it's dark instead of white. It's unique to the Central Europe. You can find it in Poland and part of Czech Republic and in Ukraine. So you can't find it in the US, for instance, according to the botanists. And it's quite nice, up to 20 meters tall. And as you can see, as with the birches, it may have some amazing shapes. Yes, that's exactly what you think. Those nice blue round things are blueberries. Very delicious, very common in the Polish forests. Some of them are green, not ripe yet. Beautiful thing, delicious thing, and I'm glad the season starts. The marshes in the Kampinos forest are connected to the same thing as the sand dunes, to the glacier. 10,000 years ago, when the glacier started moving backwards to Scandinavia, there was less and less water running in the valley of Wisła River, or what would be the Wisła River in the future. And this area that will become Kampinos National Park became a little drier, but drier as in marsh dry. That definitely helped to preserve the wild primeval in some way forest in Kampinos. When the area was full of marshes, people that settled down in the area of the valley of the river, they wouldn't go too deep into the woods. The marshes were too difficult to travel. So the animals, the forest was more or less safe. In the 19th century, the settlers started digging the channels in the areas, so the water table became a little lower. The access to the Kampinos forest became a little better. The natural resources that were in the forest were exploited, like the peat bogs in the long marshes. For instance, this close to Palmiry Cemetery, the one that I will tell you about in the next video, that was used, of course, for peat excavation. The trouble was that later more and more normal trees started to grow in this area. Then when the park was created, some of the trees were cut down. The more natural processes started to take place, but right now with the climate change, the land in the park is drier and drier. So again, the normal, not the Alder type of trees are growing in that region.
There's hills on the both sides of the road, so let's assume that was one big hill. It's a dune. There's a reason why there's so much sand here, because basically Mazovia region, where we are, is a very flat piece of land, though there are of course hills, as you can see, and though the material for the construction of them, the material that created them, was brought here by the glacier in the Ice Age. As you know, the glacier transported everything with it, took everything along its way. Then, when it was melting from the bottom, and there were some small streams that were transporting different materials, some smaller, bigger rocks, and also the sand. Hence, most of the hills, well, majority, probably all of the hills here in the Kampinos National Park are the dunes that are made of this sand that was brought by the glacier. I know that doesn't seem too impressive, especially if you're from the mountains, as I am, but for the flat land, like Mazovia region is, it's incredibly interesting, it's incredibly different.
So thank you for being with me. Thank you for that little walk to the Kampinos forest that we took today. Next time we'll be still visiting the Kampinos forest and we'll see some more historical places. There are quite a few. And the most important of it is the War Cemetery in Palmiry, connected to the story of World War II and the German war crimes. As usual, I hope that you find those videos enjoyable and you learn a tiny bit about Poland and Warsaw from those videos. Remember, there's also another, let's say, channel on that YouTube account, the Polish legend. So far, there's only one, but more are being prepared. Also, if you want to buy me a beer or coffee, just go to my personal information, and there is a link to the PayPal collection there. So I hope that you will have a wonderful week ahead of you. Until next time.